The town of Silverwood, Colorado, nestled against the foothills of the Rockies, was a place where life moved at a tranquil, predictable pace. Its tree-lined streets and tightly knit community gave it the charm of a postcard-perfect setting. However, on the evening of June 17th, this peaceful town became the epicenter of a mystery that would shatter its serene facade. Emily Carter, a 27-year-old bride-to-be, disappeared without a trace just days before her wedding. That day, Emily had been immersed in preparations for the upcoming celebration. Her schedule had been packed with appointments, the most significant of which was a final fitting for her wedding dress at Bella Boutique, a well-known bridal shop in downtown Silverwood. According to the boutique owner, Emily had been in high spirits, excitedly talking about her plans for the big day. She had left the shop at 7 p.m., her wedding dress carefully packed in a garment bag. After leaving the boutique, Emily had driven toward home, seemingly following her usual route. The next morning, her silver sedan was discovered parked near Pinewood Overlook, a scenic but secluded hiking area on the outskirts of town. The car's doors were unlocked, and the vehicle appeared undisturbed, except for one chilling detail. Her engagement ring sat conspicuously on the dashboard. Inside the car, her phone, purse, and keys were missing. Not long after, search teams combing the area made another grim discovery. In a clearing about 300 feet from the parked car, Emily's wedding dress was found torn and stained with blood. The sight of the dress, discarded like an afterthought, sent shockwaves through Silverwood. The once joyful anticipation surrounding Emily's wedding was replaced with fear and uncertainty. Emily Carter was more than a beloved member of the community. She was a dedicated social worker, passionately advocating for foster children and families. Her work and warm personality had earned her admiration from many in the town. Her upcoming wedding to Daniel Wright, a successful real estate agent, had been a source of excitement for weeks. Now, instead of joyful speculation about the ceremony, the town was left with troubling questions. The Silverwood Police Department, led by Chief Frank Adler, launched a full-scale investigation. The situation was classified as a missing person case under suspicious circumstances, and the search for answers began. Detective Samantha Harris, a seasoned investigator known for her meticulous approach, was assigned to lead the case. Working alongside her was Detective Robert Quinn, whose local connections and empathy made him a valuable partner. Together, they began piecing together Emily's final known movements. One of the first clues came from surveillance footage at a gas station located about a mile from Pinewood Overlook. The grainy footage showed Emily's car pulling into the station at approximately 7:15 p.m. For a brief moment, Emily exited the vehicle, but the footage also captured the presence of an unidentified man in a dark hoodie standing near the driver's side door. There was a visible exchange between the two before Emily got back into her car and drove away. The man's face remained obscured, and his identity became a critical focus of the investigation. The search extended into the surrounding area as detectives and volunteers scoured the woods near Pinewood Overlook. Simultaneously, interviews with Silverwood residents began to paint a picture of the events leading up to Emily's disappearance. Among those interviewed was Maggie Hill, an elderly neighbor of Emily's. Maggie reported seeing a black SUV parked near Emily's house later that evening and recalled hearing raised voices outside. Though the details were sparse, Maggie's account added a new layer of intrigue to the case. By the end of the first day, the peaceful streets of Silverwood had been transformed into a landscape of tension and unease. The discovery of the bloodied wedding dress and the ominous details surrounding Emily's disappearance created an atmosphere of fear. For the residents of Silverwood, this was a tragic and unexpected disruption. For Detective Harris and her team, it marked the beginning of an arduous journey to uncover the truth. Somewhere in the quiet town, someone held the answers to Emily Carter's fate. The challenge would be finding the person willing to reveal them. The early morning light filtered through the pines as search teams combed the wooded area surrounding Pinewood Overlook. Every branch, every shadow seemed to hold the possibility of a clue. By now, news of Emily Carter's disappearance had spread beyond Silverwood. Reporters began arriving, setting up cameras near the overlook, their lenses focused on the search effort. The town's quiet existence had been abruptly replaced by the hum of radios, the shouts of search volunteers, and the whispers of a community grappling with an unthinkable loss. Detective Samantha Harris stood at the edge of the overlook, her sharp gaze scanning the scene below. The torn, bloodied wedding dress had already been sent for forensic analysis, but its discovery offered more questions than answers. Harris's experience told her that whoever had left the dress, there was making a statement. It wasn't a random act, it was deliberate, calculated. Yet there were no immediate signs of a struggle near the clearing, no evidence of tire tracks or disturbed earth. It was as if Emily had vanished into thin air. While volunteers and officers expanded the search radius, Detective Robert Quinn returned to Emily's home to examine her surroundings. The house, a charming two-bedroom on a quiet street, was untouched. There were no signs of forced entry, no ransacked rooms. It appeared that Emily had left for her fitting and never returned. But Quinn noticed something peculiar: a stack of unopened letters on the kitchen counter, bills, wedding invitations, and one envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in block letters. "You don't know what you're getting into. Walk away while you still can." Quinn photographed the letter and carefully bagged it as evidence. The message was ominous, but its author was unknown. Was it connected to Emily's disappearance, or was it an unrelated threat? He noted that the letter lacked fingerprints or identifiable markings, a detail that pointed to a methodical sender. Meanwhile, Harris turned her attention to Emily's personal life. The focus naturally shifted to Daniel Wright, the fiancé who had reported her missing. On paper, Daniel was the ideal partner: handsome, successful, and devoted to Emily. Yet cracks in that image began to surface as investigators dug deeper. A review of his financial records revealed significant credit card debt and several overdue payments on investment properties. Harris considered the possibility that Emily had discovered these financial issues and confronted him. Was the pressure of their impending marriage enough to push him over the edge? Adding to the complexity was Jason Porter, Emily's ex-boyfriend. Jason's name had come up during initial interviews with Emily's friends. He was known for his temper, and though the relationship had ended 2 years prior, Jason had struggled to move on. Harris requested a background check and learned that Jason had a history of minor run-ins with the law, including a restraining order filed by a former girlfriend. When questioned, Jason admitted to being in the area near Pinewood Overlook on the night Emily disappeared, but denied seeing her. In parallel, forensics from Emily's car added another layer of mystery. Blood was found on the steering wheel and the driver's seat, but the pattern suggested a small cut rather than a violent attack. The absence of large amounts of blood in the car complicated theories of what had happened to her. Analysts also noted smudged fingerprints on the dashboard, partially erased as if someone had attempted to wipe them away, but stopped midway. The engagement ring left on the dashboard seemed like a message, though its meaning remained unclear. As the investigation progressed, a clearer timeline began to emerge. Emily had left Bella Boutique at 7 p.m., stopped at a gas station at 7:15 p.m., and argued with an unidentified man. She was last seen driving toward Pinewood Overlook at approximately 7:30 p.m. Beyond that, her movements were unknown. Surveillance footage from neighboring businesses was scoured, but no further sightings of her car were recorded. Detective Harris's instincts told her they were dealing with someone who knew Emily well, someone who could anticipate her movements and exploit her routine. The calculated nature of the crime ruled out a random act. Whoever had taken Emily had likely planned it for weeks, if not months. The day ended with another discovery that deepened the mystery. A hiker found a black leather wallet in a shallow creek near the overlook. Inside was an ID belonging to Daniel Wright. Harris couldn't ignore the implications. The wallet's presence near the scene of Emily's disappearance was damning, but it also raised questions. Was it planted to frame him, or had Daniel made a critical error? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the wooded trails, the search teams packed up for the day. The quiet of the forest returned, but it was a false peace. Somewhere, hidden in the dark corners of Silverwood's seemingly idyllic community, the truth about Emily Carter's fate remained shrouded. For Harris and Quinn, the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to take shape, but the picture they revealed was one of betrayal, secrets, and a darkness that ran deeper than anyone had anticipated. The investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance had entered its third day, and the once quiet town of Silverwood was now a hub of activity. Search teams scoured every inch of Pinewood Overlook, while detectives followed leads that pointed to a web of lies and hidden motives. The discovery of Daniel Wright's wallet near the scene had placed him squarely in the spotlight, but the case was far from straightforward. Detective Samantha Harris sat at her desk in the Silverwood Police Department, reviewing the evidence collected so far. The engagement ring left on the dashboard, the bloodstains in Emily's car, the anonymous letter found in her house, each clue hinted at a deeper story. But the connection between them remained elusive. Harris was certain of one thing: this wasn't the work of a random assailant. Whoever had taken Emily had planned meticulously, and the act was deeply personal. Across town, Detective Robert Quinn was conducting interviews with Emily's friends and acquaintances. One of them, Megan Hart, described Emily as excited but slightly tense in the days leading up to her wedding. According to Megan, Emily had recently confided that she was worried about Daniel's behavior. She had discovered discrepancies in their shared financial accounts and suspected Daniel was hiding something. Megan's account added weight to the theory that Emily had confronted Daniel on the night she disappeared. Quinn also visited Bella Boutique, the last confirmed location Emily had been seen. The shop owner, Diane Marshall, reiterated her earlier statement that Emily was in good spirits when she left. However, a new detail emerged. Diane remembered seeing a black SUV parked across the street when Emily exited the shop. While she couldn't identify the vehicle's driver, the description matched the one provided by Emily's neighbor, Maggie Hill. Back at headquarters, Harris received the results of the forensic analysis on the blood found in Emily's car. The DNA matched Emily's, confirming it was hers. However, the report also indicated that the amount of blood was consistent with a superficial injury, perhaps a cut or scrape, rather than a fatal wound. This finding complicated the timeline of events, suggesting that whatever happened to Emily occurred after she left the car. As Harris reviewed the report, her phone buzzed. It was the forensics team with another update. A partial fingerprint had been recovered from the engagement ring left on the dashboard. The print didn't match Emily's or Daniel's, adding a new layer of intrigue. Harris requested the print be run through the national database, hoping it might lead to a breakthrough. Meanwhile, Quinn focused his attention on Jason Porter, Emily's ex-boyfriend. Jason had been evasive during his initial interview, and his presence near Pinewood Overlook on the night of Emily's disappearance couldn't be ignored. When questioned a second time, Jason admitted he had been at the Overlook to clear his head, but maintained he hadn't seen Emily. However, his body language, fidgeting hands, avoiding eye contact, told a different story. Jason's troubled past added to Harris and Quinn's suspicions. He had a history of violent outbursts and a restraining order filed by a former girlfriend. When confronted about his relationship with Emily, Jason grew defensive, claiming he hadn't spoken to her in over a year. But phone records told a different story. Jason had called Emily multiple times in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. As the pieces of the puzzle began to come together, a troubling pattern emerged. Daniel Wright's financial troubles, the anonymous letter, Jason's suspicious behavior, and the unknown fingerprint all pointed to a complex web of motives. Harris suspected that more than one person might be involved in Emily's disappearance, each with their own secrets to hide. The day ended with another chilling discovery. While reviewing surveillance footage from a nearby intersection, Quinn noticed a black SUV matching the description provided by witnesses. The vehicle was seen leaving the vicinity of Pinewood Overlook at 8:45 p.m. on the night Emily disappeared. The license plate was partially obscured, but investigators were able to trace it to a rental agency in Denver. The name on the rental agreement was Daniel Wright. Harris felt the weight of the case pressing down on her. Daniel's wallet near the scene, the rented SUV, the financial discrepancies, it all pointed to his involvement. Yet the evidence wasn't definitive. The possibility that someone was framing him couldn't be ruled out. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the detectives prepared for another sleepless night. The deeper they delved into Emily Carter's disappearance, the more they uncovered about the lives she had touched and the secrets people would go to any length to protect. Somewhere in the quiet streets of Silverwood, the truth waited to be unearthed, but the closer they got, the darker the path became. The investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance was gaining momentum, yet with every step forward, the case became increasingly tangled. The discovery that Daniel Wright had rented a black SUV matching witness descriptions placed him at the center of suspicion. Yet the partial fingerprint on Emily's engagement ring belonging to an unidentified individual, hinted that someone else might be involved. Detective Samantha Harris stared at the evidence board in the Silverwood Police Department, her gaze shifting between the photograph of Emily's bloodied wedding dress and the chilling note found in her house. The note's message was clear, but its intent was murky. Was it a warning, a threat, or something else entirely? The precision of the act suggested a methodical mind, one that thrived on control. Meanwhile, Detective Robert Quinn pursued the lead on the black SUV rented in Daniel's name. He contacted the rental agency in Denver, where staff confirmed that Daniel had picked up the vehicle 2 days before Emily's disappearance. Security footage from the agency showed Daniel arriving alone, signing the paperwork, and driving away. However, a troubling detail emerged. Daniel returned the SUV the day after Emily vanished, and the agency had already rented it out again before it could be examined by investigators. This revelation complicated matters. While it placed Daniel in the vehicle, it also meant any potential evidence, such as fibers or blood, had likely been lost. Frustrated but undeterred, Quinn requested the contact information for the subsequent renter, hoping they might have noticed something unusual. Back in Silverwood, Harris was conducting a second interview with Daniel. His demeanor was a stark contrast to their initial meeting. The confident, composed fiancé now appeared restless, his answers clipped and defensive. When asked about the rented SUV, Daniel admitted to using it but claimed he had rented it for a business trip to Denver. He denied any involvement in Emily's disappearance, insisting that he loved her and had no reason to harm her. Daniel's financial troubles, however, painted a different picture. Records showed he was tens of thousands of dollars in debt due to failed real estate investments. Detectives suspected that Emily had confronted him about his hidden financial struggles, leading to an explosive argument. When presented with these findings, Daniel grew visibly agitated but refused to answer further questions without his attorney present. The investigation took another turn when the partially obscured license plate from the black SUV yielded a surprising result. While the SUV had indeed been rented by Daniel, the footage showed it leaving Pinewood Overlook much later than Daniel's stated timeline. This raised an unsettling possibility. Was someone else driving the vehicle after Daniel returned it to Silverwood? As this new lead developed, forensics provided another crucial detail. Soil samples from Emily's torn wedding dress contained traces of minerals unique to a quarry located 15 miles from the Overlook. The quarry, long abandoned, was rarely visited except by the occasional group of adventurous hikers. Harris and Quinn immediately organized a search team to comb the area, hoping it might yield answers. The quarry was a sprawling, desolate expanse, its jagged cliffs and scattered debris giving it an eerie, forgotten quality. As the team fanned out, they discovered a disturbing clue: a partially buried duffel bag near the edge of the quarry. Inside, investigators found a pair of blood-stained gloves, duct tape, and a torn piece of fabric matching the veil Emily had worn to her final dress fitting. This discovery sent shockwaves through the investigative team. The contents of the bag strongly suggested premeditation, yet the question of who had planted it remained unanswered. The blood on the gloves was sent for DNA analysis, but Harris knew it would likely match Emily's. The key lay in identifying who had placed the bag there and why. As the quarry search continued, another break in the case came from Jason Porter, Emily's ex-boyfriend. Phone records revealed that Jason had called Emily multiple times in the days leading up to her disappearance, despite his earlier claims of no contact. When confronted, Jason finally admitted to meeting Emily at a diner 3 days before she vanished. According to Jason, Emily had confided in him that she was having second thoughts about the wedding due to Daniel's erratic behavior. Jason's account added weight to the theory that Emily had been planning to confront Daniel on the night she disappeared. However, Jason's volatile history and his proximity to Pinewood Overlook on the night in question kept him under scrutiny. While his claims about Emily's doubts seemed credible, Harris couldn't ignore the possibility that Jason's lingering feelings for her had driven him to desperate actions. The tension in Silverwood grew as the days passed. Rumors swirled about Daniel's involvement, Jason's history, and the ominous figure in the gas station footage. For the detectives, the challenge was to untangle the threads of truth from a web of lies and half-truths. Every piece of evidence brought them closer to understanding what had happened to Emily Carter. But the picture that emerged was darker and more twisted than anyone could have imagined. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the quarry, Detective Harris stood amidst the jagged rocks, her mind racing. Somewhere in the depths of Silverwood's serene facade lay the answer. But with every step forward, it became clear that the truth about Emily's fate was buried under layers of betrayal, deceit, and carefully concealed secrets. The discovery of the duffel bag at the quarry added a chilling new dimension to the case. The blood-stained gloves and the torn piece of Emily Carter's veil were unmistakable signs of premeditation. Detective Samantha Harris couldn't shake the feeling that the quarry had been used as part of an elaborate plan to misdirect the investigation. But whose plan was it? The evidence was damning, but the lack of definitive links to any one suspect kept the case precariously balanced. Back at the Silverwood Police Department, the results of the DNA analysis from the gloves confirmed Harris's suspicions. The blood belonged to Emily Carter. The forensics team also uncovered faint traces of another person's DNA on the duct tape found in the bag. It was a breakthrough, but they needed a match. Harris ordered a comparison against the DNA samples collected from Daniel Wright and Jason Porter, knowing that the results could either tighten the noose around one suspect or widen the pool of possibilities. As they waited for the results, Detective Robert Quinn followed up on a new lead regarding the SUV Daniel had rented. The second renter, a traveling salesman named Brian Ellis, reported noticing nothing unusual except for a faint smell of bleach in the vehicle. This detail caught Quinn's attention. If someone had attempted to clean the SUV, it suggested they were covering their tracks. The timeline was tight, too tight for Daniel to have returned the vehicle to the rental agency and driven back to Pinewood Overlook to stage a scene. Quinn began to suspect that another person might have been involved. Meanwhile, Harris conducted a deeper analysis of the anonymous letter found at Emily's house. The letter's typeface and phrasing suggested someone with a methodical personality, someone who wanted to control the narrative. Comparing this with the profile of their primary suspects, she began leaning toward an unsettling theory. Emily's disappearance might not have been an impulsive act, but rather the culmination of weeks, if not months, of planning. The quarry search provided yet another unsettling clue, a tire track, partially obscured by debris, leading away from the area. It matched the tread of a commercial-grade SUV, consistent with the rental vehicle Daniel had used. The track suggested the bag had been planted long after Emily's initial disappearance, reinforcing the idea of a calculated effort to manipulate the investigation. When the DNA results finally came in, they revealed an unexpected twist. The secondary DNA on the duct tape didn't match Daniel or Jason. It belonged to an unidentified individual. This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigative team. The possibility of a third party raised new questions. Was this person a co-conspirator? Or were they the true mastermind behind Emily's disappearance? As these pieces came together, the detectives revisited the timeline. Emily had left Bella Boutique at 7 p.m., stopped briefly at the gas station, and was last seen driving toward Pinewood Overlook at 7:30 p.m. Daniel's alibi placed him at his office until 8 p.m., but the SUV's movements indicated someone else had been driving it later that evening. Meanwhile, Jason's presence near the Overlook, combined with his history and evasive behavior, kept him in the crosshairs. Despite these leads, Harris couldn't ignore the growing sense that the case was slipping into darker territory. The deliberate staging of evidence, the precision of the crime, and the involvement of an unknown party pointed to someone capable of meticulous planning. Whoever they were, they had anticipated the investigators' moves and stayed one step ahead. The pressure mounted as the media frenzy surrounding the case intensified. Silverwood residents watched anxiously as each development unfolded. Their once peaceful town now a symbol of fear and uncertainty. For Harris and Quinn, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Emily Carter's life might have been lost, but the truth behind her disappearance was still within reach. As night fell, Harris sat in her office piecing together the fragments of the case. The suspects, the evidence, the timeline, it all pointed to a calculated act of betrayal by someone Emily trusted. Yet the identity of the person pulling the strings remained just out of reach. Harris knew one thing for certain: the facade of innocence in Silverwood was cracking, and when it finally shattered, the truth would come spilling out, no matter how dark it was. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together. But the emerging picture was more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. The revelation of an unidentified third party, the calculated staging of evidence, and the eerie control over the investigation pointed to a mind steeped in manipulation. Detective Samantha Harris felt the weight of the case pressing harder. Somewhere in Silverwood, a predator was watching their every move. The day began with an anonymous tip. A caller, using a voice modulator, claimed they had seen a man carrying a large duffel bag near the quarry on the night Emily disappeared. The caller refused to identify themselves or provide further details, but the specificity of the information reignited the focus on the quarry. Harris instructed a forensic team to revisit the site with enhanced equipment, scouring for anything that might have been overlooked. As the team swept the quarry, Quinn worked another angle. He'd been revisiting the financial records of Daniel Wright and uncovered a name that hadn't come up before. Rachel Foster, a private contractor Daniel had hired several months earlier. Rachel's specialty was in risk mitigation, which raised red flags. Why would Daniel, a real estate agent, require her services? When Quinn finally tracked Rachel down, she admitted that her work for Daniel involved assessing security risks for his properties. But she also revealed that Daniel had confided in her about mounting debts and personal pressures. Daniel had told her he was drowning. Meanwhile, the quarry search yielded an unsettling new discovery. A hidden compartment in the duffel bag's lining contained a flash drive. Its contents sent shockwaves through the team. Photos of Emily taken without her knowledge, spanning several months. Many were mundane, her walking to her car, leaving her office. But others were more invasive, including one of her standing in her bedroom window. These photos suggested a level of obsession that went far beyond the known suspects. As Harris and Quinn reviewed the photos, their focus shifted. The timeline of the images revealed a disturbing trend. Whoever had taken them knew Emily's schedule intimately, far better than someone like Jason Porter, whose connection to her had diminished over time. The photos pointed to someone actively involved in her life. Forensics ran another sweep on the duffel bag and discovered a small thread embedded in the zipper, consistent with fibers from a commercial-grade uniform. This detail added to Harris's growing suspicion that the third party was someone blending seamlessly into Silverwood, unnoticed and unsuspected. The break came when the team traced the origin of the photos on the flash drive. Metadata embedded in the files revealed they had been taken using a high-end camera purchased 6 months earlier. The purchaser's name stunned everyone. Ethan Daniels, a handyman contracted by several local businesses, including Bella Boutique and Pinewood Overlook's park maintenance crew. Ethan had no prior criminal record and was regarded as quiet and hardworking. But when investigators pulled his employment records, they found an unsettling pattern. Ethan had been present at nearly every key location tied to the case. He'd worked odd jobs at Bella Boutique, done repairs at Daniel Wright's office, and even completed landscaping projects near the quarry. Harris and Quinn moved quickly. Ethan was brought in for questioning, his demeanor calm and cooperative. When asked about Emily, he spoke fondly of her, describing her as kind and beautiful. But when the photos were presented, his mask of composure cracked. Ethan claimed he had taken them as a hobby, insisting they were harmless. He denied any involvement in Emily's disappearance, even as his body language betrayed him. Sweaty palms, fidgeting hands, and averted eyes. Forensic evidence, however, was beginning to close the net around him. The DNA found on the duct tape matched Ethan's. A search of his modest apartment uncovered more disturbing items, including a journal detailing Emily's routines and a crude map marking the quarry, Pinewood Overlook, and her home. The evidence painted a chilling picture of a man consumed by obsession. As the sun set on Silverwood that evening, Harris and Quinn pieced together the horrific truth. Ethan had been stalking Emily for months, his obsession driving him to plan her abduction meticulously. On the night of her disappearance, he had followed her from Bella Boutique to Pinewood Overlook, using his familiarity with the area to stage the scene and mislead investigators. But the question remained, why had he gone to such lengths to frame Daniel Wright? Ethan's journal provided the answer. He saw Daniel as an obstacle to his delusions, a man unworthy of Emily's love. By removing both Emily and Daniel, Ethan believed he could protect her legacy while punishing Daniel for what he saw as an unearned claim to her affections. The realization left Harrison Quinn grappling with the magnitude of Ethan's depravity. What had begun as a case of a missing bride now revealed itself as a chilling exploration of obsession and control. With Ethan in custody, the town of Silverwood began to breathe again, but the scars of Emily's disappearance and the darkness it unearthed would remain forever etched in its memory. With Ethan Daniels in custody, the case that had gripped Silverwood seemed to be nearing its conclusion. But for Detective Samantha Harris, loose ends still dangled, and the weight of the unanswered questions pressed heavily. While Ethan's obsession with Emily Carter and the overwhelming evidence tied him to her disappearance, there was an unsettling complexity to his actions that hinted at something more. Why had Ethan gone to such great lengths to implicate Daniel Wright, and what had truly transpired on the night Emily vanished? As forensic teams combed through the contents of Ethan's storage locker, a disturbing narrative began to take shape. Among the items was a partially burned piece of paper, a hand-drawn timeline detailing Emily's movements on the day of her disappearance. Next to her final entry, 7:30 p.m., leaves Bella Boutique, Ethan had scribbled a chilling note: the moment to act. Further evidence linked Ethan to Pinewood Overlook on the night of Emily's disappearance. A pair of boots found in his locker contained soil consistent with the quarry where Emily's torn veil had been discovered. Fibers from the duffel bag matched materials found in Ethan's work van, and tire treads from the quarry aligned with the vehicle he often drove for his maintenance jobs. As this evidence solidified Ethan's role, the team focused on unraveling the web of misdirection he had spun. The photos on the flash drive, the journal documenting Emily's routines, and the carefully staged scene with the wedding dress all pointed to a mind consumed by control. Ethan hadn't just sought to harm Emily. He wanted to craft a narrative where he could frame her fiancé as the villain and himself as the unseen avenger. Detective Robert Quinn, reviewing Ethan's psychological profile, noted that his behavior fit the patterns of a pathological stalker. Ethan's obsession with Emily wasn't born out of personal interaction, but rather an idealized fantasy. He had built a version of her in his mind that ignored her actual life, friends, and relationships. To him, Emily wasn't a person, but a symbol, one he felt compelled to rescue from what he perceived as an imperfect world. Despite Ethan's meticulous planning, there were gaps in his execution that detectives exploited. When confronted with the DNA match from the duct tape and the evidence in his storage locker, Ethan's facade of denial crumbled. Under the pressure of interrogation, he began to unravel. Ethan admitted to following Emily on the night of her disappearance, tailing her car from the boutique to Pinewood Overlook. As she parked, he approached her under the pretense of concern, claiming he had seen someone suspicious nearby. When Emily grew wary and attempted to leave, Ethan panicked. He grabbed her, forcing her into the woods. The confrontation escalated as Emily fought back, but Ethan's obsession clouded his judgment. In his delusional mind, he believed he was saving her from a life she didn't deserve. Ethan's confession brought clarity to Emily's final moments, but it also revealed a chilling level of premeditation. He had planted the duffel bag in Daniel's wallet at the quarry to divert attention and frame Daniel as a jealous fiancé. The anonymous letter sent to Emily was another part of his scheme, designed to instill fear and further isolate her. Ethan had intended to return to the quarry after the investigation quieted down to destroy any remaining evidence. With Ethan's admission, detectives finally understood the full scope of his crimes. Yet the revelation brought little solace to Emily's grieving family and friends. The knowledge of what she endured at the hands of a stranger, driven by twisted delusions, only deepened their pain. As Ethan was formally charged with first-degree murder, unlawful restraint, and evidence tampering, the town of Silverwood began to reckon with the darkness that had lurked unnoticed within its boundaries. Residents who had once greeted Ethan as a helpful handyman now spoke of their unease, recalling subtle signs of his fixation that had gone overlooked. For Harrison Quinn, the conclusion of the case was bittersweet. Justice for Emily Carter had been served, but the emotional toll of the investigation lingered. Harris, reflecting on the intricate layers of manipulation and obsession, felt a renewed determination to protect those who might one day fall prey to individuals like Ethan. As the sun set over Silverwood, The town's quiet streets seemed almost untouched by the chaos that had unfolded. Yet for those closest to Emily, the scars would remain, a painful reminder of how quickly a life filled with promise could be extinguished by a mind consumed with darkness. Silverwood had always been a town that prided itself on its quiet simplicity, but the disappearance and murder of Emily Carter left an indelible mark on its soul. The arrest and conviction of Ethan Daniels brought answers, but not the closure her loved ones had hoped for. The weight of Emily's loss lingered, a somber reminder that even in the most picturesque settings, darkness could take root. For Detective Samantha Harris, the case was one of the most harrowing of her career. It wasn't just the methodical cruelty of Ethan's actions that haunted her. It was the fragility of trust in a community that had always felt safe. Emily's death had exposed a truth Harris often encountered, but still struggled to accept. Predators rarely fit the mold of what people expect. Ethan had been a handyman, a familiar face in town, someone who blended into the background. Yet beneath that unassuming exterior lay a mind capable of terrifying obsession and violence. The aftermath of the case rippled through the lives of those closest to Emily. Her fiancé, Daniel Wright, bore the brunt of suspicion in the early days of the investigation. Though cleared of any wrongdoing, the emotional scars remained. The weight of guilt over his inability to protect Emily and the public scrutiny he endured left him hollow. Daniel left Silverwood shortly after Ethan's sentencing, unable to face the memories that haunted him at every corner of the town. Emily's family, devastated by the loss, channeled their grief into action. Her parents, David and Margaret Carter, founded the Emily Carter Foundation, an organization dedicated to raising awareness about stalking and supporting victims of obsessive crimes. Their work brought attention to the silent suffering many endure, empowering others to speak out before it was too late. The foundation became a beacon of hope, ensuring Emily's memory lived on through a legacy of change. Maggie Hill, the observant neighbor whose testimony helped the investigation, became an unlikely hero in Silverwood. Her vigilance and courage to come forward set an example for others, proving that even the smallest details could lead to justice. In the weeks following Ethan's arrest, Maggie reflected on the eerie feelings she'd had about him all along. Small behaviors she now realized had been warning signs. For Ethan Daniels, life behind bars offered no solace. The trial revealed a chilling portrait of a man consumed by delusions, his every action dictated by a fantasy world he had constructed around Emily. Even as he faced the consequences of his crimes, Ethan's lack of remorse unsettled those in the courtroom. In his mind, he believed he had acted out of love, a distortion of reality that only deepened the tragedy. As for Detective Robert Quinn, the case solidified his resolve to never overlook the mundane details in an investigation. It was a lesson in patience, in following threads that seemed insignificant until they revealed their importance. He often thought of Emily, not just as a victim, but as a person who had radiated kindness and promise. Her story became a driving force in his work, a reminder of why he chose to pursue justice in the first place. In the months following Ethan's conviction, Silverwood began to heal. The community came together to honor Emily's life, holding a memorial at Pinewood Overlook, where a bench was placed overlooking the serene woods she had loved. Her friends and family spoke of her vibrant spirit, her passion for helping others, and the love she had brought to everyone she met. For Harris, the case marked a turning point. She resolved to push for better training and resources to recognize and address stalking behaviors in small communities. The system had failed Emily in ways that became painfully clear too late. Harris vowed to ensure no one else in Silverwood, or anywhere, would face the same fate. As the sun set over the Rockies, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, Silverwood regained some of its quiet charm. But for those who had loved Emily, the silence carried a different weight. It was no longer the peaceful stillness of an untouched town, but a somber reflection of what had been lost. Emily Carter's life had been cut short by darkness, but her legacy illuminated a path forward. In her memory, her family, friends, and community worked to ensure that her light would never be extinguished entirely. Silverwood would never forget the lessons her story imparted, that vigilance, kindness, and justice were the most powerful tools against even the most insidious of evils. The story has been edited to ensure personal privacy and security regarding names and locations. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to see the latest and most thrilling family crime stories.